On this week's FAS TV, we visit the Glen family at Distinctive Holsteins in Cheshire to hear about their journey of moving from traditional silage making to a multi-cut system. And we hear from William Haire, Head of Estates at Easton College, about the strategies the college has taken to build organic matter in soils. With the rising cost of purchased feed and falling milk prices putting pressure on margins, switching to a multi-cut system can improve the quantity of milk produced from homegrown forage and reduce the need for purchased concentrates. Will and Louise Glen wanted to make more use of their homegrown forages and switched to a multi-cut system several years ago.
And we're Will and Louise Glen, and we've been on this route of multi-cut forage for a few years now in order to improve usage of homegrown forage and improve feed efficiency.
So we've been here since 2010. We started off pretty small and then have built on from there, and we're now farming 165 pedigree Holstein cows with our followers alongside. We're farming about 250 acres and averaging about 11,500. We take about 4,600 litres from forage and want to try and keep building on that really.
We originally took this on as a Cheshire County Council tenancy in 2010, and then we're fortunate enough in 2018 to get the chance to buy it, which has now allowed us the chance to expand. So we bought 130 acres when we bought the farm, and then we rent that again, allowing us to produce the forage for the animals that we have. We've been on this multi-cut system since probably about 2017. We normally traditionally did 4 cuts of silage, but I think in 2017 it was a really good year for grass growth, and we ended up taking an extra cut of silage, and that's where we've seen the benefit of having that leafier grass in the clump. We found that the multi-cut silage with a higher protein in it really complements the maize silage and hopefully saves us buying in less protein. We've also found with like weather conditions we're able to cut a larger acreage in a shorter weather window because it doesn't take as long to wilt. We normally cut one day, ted it out and pick up the next day, and we find that gives it an ideal wilt of about 30 dry matter. And also with it being cut earlier, there's a greener bottom left and the sward recovers quicker, especially in drier weather. All in all, that entails us to get the 5 cuts in the summer quite easily. Probably another advantage we've noticed with the multi-cut is at the minute we've got most of the silage all in one clump, that we're not changing from silages, so we're feeding a consistent mix of all the forages all the time. So we're not moving from clump to clump. We don't get a drop in yield or a drop in dry matter intake, so we find the consistency of it. And if one cut isn't as nice as you might like, well, the others mix in and you don't notice it the same, rather than having to feed that clump separately on its own.
Yeah, so the cows have got on really well with it. They've increased dry matter intake wise, and obviously we're milking quite a high performing cow that's got to work quite hard, so we needed to make sure we got those intakes. We found that silage has been much more palatable for them, and a knock-on effect has been an increase in fertility and obviously conception rate alongside that. And probably the benefit of seeing better feet in the cows, just the overall makeup of these cows, they're just running that little bit better and much happier, and we're drying them off at that 3 body condition score, which we're really happy with.
Also, we're probably seeing an increase in milk solids, mainly due to the extra energy in the silage, and also the higher intakes has increased butter fat and protein quite considerably. We use contractor for everything. We are very fortunate that our contractor is quite a smaller operator. We're normally the first in his list, so he comes to us and gets the job done before going elsewhere, and we find that works really well because then for the subsequent cuts we're always ahead of everyone else. So unless the weather gets in the way, it's never really an issue to get them here, and we can normally cut when we want to, which is one of the main benefits of this multi-cut system.
And it just gives us that little bit more wriggle room. You know, if weather's not doing as it should do, we've got a few more days either side that we can work with and try and get in that right window.
On a charge perspective, he charges by the hour, which I gather if you're paying by the acre and smaller cuts, it seems quite a big bill. But when he charges us per hour, it certainly seems economical, and we definitely get the return from extra yield in grass and definitely the extra yield from the cows. So all in all, it certainly pays for itself.
Yeah, and the saving that we made in that first year of doing it, that last cut, actually was already paid for by changing from going per acre to the hour.
In terms of nutrient planning, we normally aim to cut last few days of April, beginning of May. So I normally work back from that on the basis of about 2 units in the usage of 2 units of nitrogen a day. I'll normally apply 60 to 70 units of nitrogen sulphur compound and about 3,000 gallons slurry. So we normally just try and work back from that. The subsequent, on the cuts after that, because we're normally cutting every 30 days, that's the aim. Again, applying about sort of anywhere between 30 to 40 units of fertiliser and additional 2,500–3,000 gallons slurry on top of that. So that's basically how we plan out the rest of the cuts after that.
Switching from the traditional silage making of 2 to 3 cuts per year to a multi-cut system does not come without its challenges. Making the switch has been a learning curve for Will and Louise.
Probably one of the issues with it is I always find that the second cut, because we're always trying to make that at the end of May, the grass generally wants to seed, no matter whether we've cut early, cut late, no matter what, it's just its natural time to seed. So I sometimes find that that's the difficult cut to do, that I'm a bit of the mindset that if the weather's right, we just go and take it off. And I think that's part of the thing with the multi-cut. You've just got to go with the programme. You're like, I've sort of like planned in the diary, this is when stuff's getting cut, and if the weather's right, it goes, because you have to think about the knock-on effects of the next cut. It's not necessarily this cut, it's how's it going to impact for the rest of the year. That is one of the things. Some of them intermediate cuts can be a bit of an issue. We generally find the first cut and sometimes the 5th cut are nearly the best silage, because it's a lot more digestible at that stage.
Yeah, so some of the challenges that we have seen is trying to keep it in that clamp. Seeing a bit of silage slippage has been a bit of a challenge, and also making sure we're getting across the face of the clamp as quick as we can has been a bit of a challenge, but we're trying to mitigate around that long term. The other sort of main thing that we found is thinking about what we're going to feed our dry cows, that, you know, we can only give them a little bit of it. It can be that bit too potent for them. And the same for our young stock as well. You know, everything we're feeding is very potent, so we just have to be thinking whether we can take a longer cut at some point and feed that to dry cows or young stock.
I think some of the useful tips is have a good relationship with your contractor. I think if you're wanting to step down the road of doing more cuts, I think you need to have a conversation about how you go, as I said, potentially paying by the hour for some of the jobs. Probably looking at the weather is like everything. The weather dictates. You can have all these plans, but it's the weather that you've got to go by. But we found, as we said before, is be prepared to cut, because you might think, oh well, I'll leave it another couple of days, and all of a sudden it rains for 2 weeks, and suddenly you've gone from having a really nice crop of grass to something that's gone past its best, and you won't see the performance out of the cows, plus the implications of the knock-on of that for any cuts that are to follow that. And then, yeah, you're also in the contractor's queue as well, where the chances are if you've gone in early, you're probably going to be out of the way of everyone else for the cuts after that. Another tip is making sure the clump's well rolled. We try our best to have an extra tractor in the clump all the time, just to get that compaction into it. As we said before, one of the potential issues with this sort of leafy grass is clump slippage, especially if it's a little bit damp. So we find trying to get the extra tractor on, get it well compacted, can also helps consolidate. It makes better silage, but it can eliminate some of the slippage that is a potential with this sort of early leafy grass.
I think you've got to really work with your nutritionist as well, because no matter what, you're still working with a forage that's really small leaf, volatile. If she's not digesting it or it's going through her really quickly, you're not going to get the best out of it. And we, you know, after all these years, have about hit the sweet spot now, and we've got it right, but it does take practice. It's not something that's you're going to see the benefit of in 12 months. It's 3 or 4 years down the line. Once you've got yourself rehearsed and ready to do the job, you know where you're at, and then you're singing pretty much. And from the cow perspective, you know, we've got happier and healthier cows, that this silage is doing exactly what the rumen wants. They're functioning really well, and they're overall giving that greater performance and giving what we need and making us profitable farmers, which is everything that we've wanted to be.
Easton College on the outskirts of Norwich City runs to about 200 hectares with mainly light sand to loam soil types on the farm. The farm is primarily arable alongside a livestock enterprise of a small suckler herd and a flock of ewes that lamb in January and April. Due to typically having low levels of rainfall, the farm has spent time focusing on improving soil organic matter for water retention.
Yeah, so a little bit about our climate here and the soil type and so on at Easton College. So we're in the driest part of the country here in Norfolk, so we're situated right mid-Norfolk, literally 4 or 5 miles from the centre of Norwich. Soil type was once described to me as being heavy. It's light to medium sandy loams. We do have a very high proportion of flint in the soil. There's a few fields around here. We have a small proportion of soil in the flint, so some of the soil is really, really aggressive and abrasive and exceptionally stony. A year like this, where we've had nearly a metre of rain, that's been fantastic. Those crops are looking really, really well. In a normal year, they're probably dead by mid-May. So this year, we've scored a winner. What we try to do with those soils is, and those are, I suppose, a focus for some of the more radical thinking that we're trying to do, stick our winter crops there, but that's where we really need to think about what we do grow. So why did we start considering organic matter? Whenever I took over responsibility for managing the college estate, the first thing I wanted to do was establish some baselines. So we carried out a fairly extensive soil analysis right across the farm, looking at everything from the major elements to minor and macro elements, looking at the actual physical properties of the soil, so the proportions of sand, silt and clay, and then within that organic matter. And to be fair, I had been told before I started that the soil was heavy. I did laugh at them when I said they were heavy. They've never been to County Antrim, but having carried out that analysis, that shed a lot of light on the problems that we had. Effectively, the soil here is really a high proportion of sand, so our worst field is probably 45% sand. Sorry, our best field is probably 45% sand. Our worst fields in the region of 56% sand, but our organic matters are all between 1.6 and 2%. We have a consistent problem here with soil slumping, and I'm attributing a lot of that slumping issue to, yes, the sand, but primarily the organic matter, which leads us into all sorts of other challenges, where we go from being incredibly wet one day to being rock hard the next. And it's a struggle, I think, at times for plants to get in. So that was kind of I'll not call it a wake-up call, because it was the first thing I did, but that was the point where we realised we needed to do something here. I've been doing quite a bit of research anyway. The soil all of a sudden became very interesting to me, even before I took over my role here. So I've been reading lots of books about it, and wishing I had studied more at school about chemistry and biology. But it's been a real eye-opener since that as to how we can actually manipulate things within the land, because ultimately we're not going to change the structure of the soil, or we're not going to change the composition of the soil, but we can change the structure of the soil. And it's done, I think, primarily through organic matter and the benefit that brings. So how and when we went about changing it and making changes, we went through probably 18 months of not doing very much, other than stopping doing some things which I felt were negatively impacting the soil, and starting to do some things which I thought were a positive change. I needed to get a baseline. I wanted to understand exactly how the soil behaved, how it functioned, what crops worked, what crops didn't work, and to create some sort of rotation, because it was a little bit chaotic, I think, when I took over. So things that we stopped doing, we don't plough unless we specifically have to. This spring we have ploughed, but it's been to establish grass lays, so where we wanted to bury some trash, or in some of the instances level some fields that were a bit rough, where we put those into grass. We have ploughed in advance of that to get them nice and level. We haven't grown sugar beet for 2 years. There've been a lot of sugar beet grown on the farm. There'll be a lot of potatoes grown on the farm because we have irrigation, and it never really got a chance, I think, to recover from that. So we were growing too many things too quickly. So we've backed off from those. We're essentially a cereal and grass farm now, to use the grass to try and build structure, but being more sympathetic with how we actually establish the crops. So being an agricultural college, one of the things that we have to do is teach students to drive, teach students how to use equipment. So there's still things that go on which I probably wouldn't do if it was my farm and we didn't have that role. But we're using less invasive cultivation techniques. We're using less invasive plant establishment techniques, trying to move the soil a lot less and trying to grow crops which actually contribute to soil health, not just as a cash stream. So this is my pet field, this is the field, this is my problem field, which everything should be so good about it, but it just has given us a few challenges. The farm here, we're on part of, well, the bottom part of this field is about 22 metres above sea level. We're about 44 metres. That's the range, that's the extent of the altitude for the entire farm. This is our sandiest field, about 56% sand. This is our lowest organic matter field at about 1.6%. It's south facing, so it's going to capture lots and lots of light, but it droughts out very quickly. So this is the field where we've kind of concentrated all our efforts. If we're going to try things different, we will do it all in the one place rather than try and treat the whole farm. When I say treat, we're not spending lots of money. We are thinking about what we do and trying to think what would happen in nature. So if we walked away today, what would nature do? How can we simulate some of those things that happen in nature? This being such a good field for growing stuff, the problem has been that it has been cropped, and whenever we had a dairy here in days gone by, they grew cereal crops here, took the straw, used it for bedding, and then put the straw where they were growing maize on the other side of the farm. So that's how organic matter has got there. This field is about 13.5 hectares. We had a poor crop of a winter barley last year and a poor crop of spring barley the year before. My saviour's oats, so we're growing Mascani oats this year in it to try and rebuild. We use the root structure to provide us with some roots to start pulling soil together, but because it's a fairly low input crop, so we haven't put massive amounts of synthetic products on it. Here, after harvest last year, we chopped the straw. Maris otter straw is not very good for bedding, so we chopped it, spread it. We put on about 20 tonnes to the hectare of fairly averagely composted farmyard manure from the livestock unit, and then we give it a very shallow cultivation, about 15 millimetres, no, sorry, about 20 millimetres deep, a very shallow cultivation just to get that incorporated and start the breakdown process. We planted a very simple cover crop with fodder radish and yellow mustard and a little bit of phacelia in it, and we drilled that, we actually broadcast that on the surface and then walked away and left it. It was germinated in about 7 days. The crop that cover crop lasted for 10 weeks. We sprayed it off with glyphosate at that point, and then we direct drilled using our sky drill, we direct drilled into that standing cover crop. We tried to throw everything at it. So we left our straw for organic matter. We applied the composted farm manure to give us some organic matter, but also it's biologically active. So there's bugs and all sorts of stuff in there, and bacteria and fungi, which will hopefully populate that straw and help the breakdown. And then the cover crop was our third stream of building organic matter. So everything's about building organic matter. We did something on thinking last year. We didn't realise we'd actually done it. So we baled all the straw across the college last year. That has given us sheds that are still fairly full because we haven't used much. This year we're not going to chop any straws. What we've tried to do is use that leverage in a good straw year, fill the shed up. Next time around we don't need any straw, so we can chop it and leave that on the surface to let the sun act on it and let it break down. There'll be a little bit of cultivation probably, but we're not intending to bury that straw. We're trying to leave it as near the surface as possible, but take the opportunity of having a really good straw year to allow us not to need any straw for a year or two after that. So there's lots of little tweaks everywhere to try and get that organic matter. And for me, it's I don't really care where it comes from. I don't want to import it. So if we can produce it by leaving the straw, by applying farmyard manure, and by growing a huge biomass in a cover crop, which is what we really got here, leaving the soil and the straw on the surface to allow the sun to help break it down, applying the manure as a source of organic matter, but also a biologically active product which is going to assist that breakdown, and then having a cover crop, a large volume of cover crop that will then break down and decompose over the winter, which has given us organic matter, but also releasing nutrients that it's hopefully captured. We're in an area very close to one of the treasured waterways here in Norfolk, the River Haire, so we've also got to be really mindful of making sure on land that slopes like this, the river's only about half a mile away, that we're using these things as well to capture nutrients. So we don't do things for one purpose. Everything we do is about trying to get multiple benefits from one simple step. Yep, so we'll just talk a little bit about organic matter and how we're using farmyard manure as part of that process here on the farm. So we are quite a small livestock enterprise, but every ounce of organic matter we can pick up from farmyard manure, we will. So we're really lucky to get the manure from the equine centre as well here. So we've got lots of straw and shavings based stuff, and it's like rocket fuel from there. So we're piling it it's kind of centrally on the farm in different areas to apply on the lands. This is part of our strategy, using crop residues, using manures, and then using the cover crops. We're piling it up. At some point in the next couple of weeks, when it dries up enough, we'll actually start to turn this. So it's lay here from Christmas. Ground conditions haven't really allowed us to get on and do much with it, but we'll give this a few turns to get it heating up again, and then this will be applied at probably quite a low rate, maybe 20 tonnes to the hectare, just as sparsely as we can across the farm. The other thing that we're doing this year is chopping all our straw, because we've got loads of straw in the shed. So hopefully the combination of the chopped straw first, mulching the top of the ground, the manure applied on top of that, and then a very gentle cultivation in. We'll mix those two things together and get the bacterial life and fungal life and all the other little things in the compost working on breaking down that straw and releasing nutrients, but also stabilising some of the nutrients that are there. Part of the appeal of applying this is you're putting up matter onto the soil, which is also going to hold water. So applying this, not cultivating it down too far, so leaving it as near the surface as we can in the nutritionally active area that's already there. This is hopefully going to help hold water that falls on, but over time that's going to break down and help us build that structure and change that structure to allow air and water to flow freely, but also hold water where it needs to be.